Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to the weekly Q&A where I answer questions from the community, either DMs from you guys, posts, or things that came up in various coaching calls. And, as always, we'll kind of dive right in. So the first question is around offers, right? So when you are trying to get a job, your value proposition, and it says, I don't have the exact experience required for this job. How do I show that I can do it, right? And so this really comes back to, so there's basically two strategies here. If you're like, okay, I don't quite fit this, what do I do? Right. And so the first strategy is back to the core, UVP, unique value proposition, or as we like to say, the executive value proposition, which is there's two things. I can do the job. That's part one. And part two is I bring this unique thing that other candidates don't, because everybody's going to come in and say, I can do this job. That's why they're applying. They think they can do the job. So your job is to have something else that is valuable, right? So the first way is if you don't quite have everything you need to do the job, if you can bring something super valuable, that can easily outweigh this small piece that you're missing, right? So, you know, just to make it easy in sort of a revenue or team building perspective, it's like, well, if you hire me, I come with relationships, right? Which is something you can't buy. So I come with relationships to these companies, with these buyers. If I'm a salesperson, I come with these relationships with these experts. I can bring them in, get these sort of talented people very easily. That, for example, can often be worth a lot, even if you don't quite have the skill that I need, right? And that's something you see a lot of times when people bring in people that they know, they don't actually have all the great skills, but they have enough other values that they're like, yeah, but this person will be great in this role. So, first one is I'm bringing something else that is even more valuable than this piece I'm missing, right? So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is if you don't quite have that, what do? You want to get as close as possible. So you want to ask yourself is, okay, this is what they ask for. Break it down into kind of its components and what do I have? Right. And so, a couple examples here. So one would be, team leadership, right? Oh, have you run a team of this size? And you're just, well, the answer is no. So don't ever say no. You say, well, what have you done? Let's say, the team size is 20 and you've done 10, but it was for four different functions. And then the question is, have you ever hired or fired? Well, maybe you haven't fired anybody, but have you had performance problems? So you've managed them. Okay, that's the closest analog. Okay, if you haven't managed people, have you managed consultants? Because managed people is the hire and fire and performance reviews part of it, as in addition to managing work. So, well, I've done the managing work part. I've done the hiring because I've vetted these things. I've done this and this. So, what are the things that you've done? And you always want to answer of, basically, have you ever done X? Well, again, you want to be careful saying yes, depending on how close you are. I'd say if you're 80% or more, you're yes. Otherwise, just say, have you done X? In my experience, what I've done is A, B, C, and D, which is 80%. And while I haven't focused as much on this part, I'm sure I can learn it, right? But what you want to do is squeeze the gap to as small as possible. So have you done this? No, I have not done that. That is a zero. You just answered no to that question. I assume you have no experience to doing this. So don't do that. What you want to do is say, have you done this? Well, in the context of my last role, I was able to do A, B, C, D, and E. That's 80%. So the one thing to your specific question that I haven't done is this small part, but I've done this other thing that's kind of like that. And so I'm highly confident that I would be able to do that in the role that we're talking about. Right. So that's kind of what you want to do. You want to squeeze that gap to as small as you can make it. All right. That's the first question. Next one. All right, this is around leads. I find myself a bit unmotivated in the job search. Any suggestions? And this is similar to a question I think we had maybe last week. But the idea is you want to focus it on the smaller chunks, right? Because this is just habit forming in general. So this isn't necessarily specific to job search, but it applies here very much, which is if your idea is like get a job, what do you need to get a job? You need to apply, you need to write cover letters. I need to have interviews. I go to a network. Like there's a huge list. It's just very overwhelming. Oh, I don't want to do this, right? Which is natural. So what you want to do is kind of chunk it down. What are the immediate steps that you need to do? Is it about applications? Is it about networking? Is it about what interview practice? What do you need to do? And then chunk it down and then come up with a commitment that you can kind of keep, right? And this is where, minimum viable commitment, if you're familiar with MVP, minimum viable product from a development perspective, same idea. What is the smallest chunk of thing that you will be willing to do, right? And so if you're getting overwhelmed, just forget about the big picture for a minute and bring it down to something practical that you can do. I need to reach out to 10 people to get networking calls. Okay. How many can you do? 5 a day. Should take 2 days. 3 a day. 1 a day. Like eventually it gets so small that hopefully you're a bit embarrassed if you can't send one connection message in a single day. Right. So you want to get it to the point where like you will do the activity because you will be embarrassed if you don't do it. Again, another sort of habit trick, tell somebody, right? Because if you're the only one who knows and you don't do it, you can kind of pretend you didn't make that commitment. So tell somebody, I'm going to reach out to one person a day to try to network. And then you got to report in. And again, hopefully, embarrassment is your friend here, that you don't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to sort of lack. So just again, break it down into the smallest chunk that you're willing to do and focus on doing that. This is a marathon when you're in sort of hardcore job search, right? Over time. It is a marathon. It is the regular activity that you need to keep up. That is what differentiates the successful people from the unsuccessful people. The successful people keep at it even when it's a bit of a drag, right? So figure out something, keep at it, and that's going to be your vector for success, right? So just keep doing it. All right, next one, sales, right? So interview. This is interesting. Okay, I'm not super excited about this position, but I do have an interview. Any suggestions on how best to approach it? So this is somebody called you. They said recruiter probably. You get an interview, but like you're not super excited about it. So in this scenario, right, you can think about it a couple different ways. The macro point I would make is you want to get something out of it, and you want to pick that before you go to the interview. And if the job isn't necessarily the most interesting, you can pick something else. So, a very simple one is you want to practice your interview skills. You're doing this because you want to try out some stories. And because you're not super interested in the job, you can try some techniques that you might be a little nervous about. I'm going to try this story. I'm not sure if it's going to land. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to ask better questions. I'm going to try to find out this information. And because sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to ask too many questions. I want to be too probing. Well, if you don't really care whether you get the job or not, try it because you might find that it actually works very effectively. So I would pick something else that you want to try, probably around your speaking communication or questioning ability. Or you say, I'm going to learn about their business and learn about something. You try to make it a learning experience where you're going to ask questions around what they're doing, what their strategies are, see if you can get some business intelligence out of it. Right? But in one way, freeing, if you don't really care about the job, you can actually use it to practice these other things. So that's what I would say. So don't just kind of approach it, have the conversation, be kind of blasé about it, because two things are going to happen. One, you're probably not going to get the job. Even if you wanted the job, you're not doing great. So you're probably not going to get the job. And two, you really did just waste time because you just talked to somebody, you didn't really have an outcome in mind. Yeah, we'll see. If you have an outcome in mind, again, something you're going to practice, something you want to learn, then it's a good conversation either way. If you don't get the job, even if the job is definitely something you don't want, you still got to either improve a skill or you got to learn something. So just have an outcome in mind, even if you're not specifically excited about the position. All right, next one. Okay, results. So now you got the job. What are the biggest mistakes when starting a new role? Like, what are the things to avoid? And so there's probably two, I would say, and the easy way to think about this is the opposite of all the good things you should do, right? You want to be the opposite. But the two most common ones, I would say that at least I've seen in my experience that you want to avoid is one, don't be a distraction, right? So I want you to be an accelerant, right? So I'm the hiring manager in this case. I have a plan. I'm trying to accomplish something. I have goals. I've got budget to hire people, or I have a hole in my team. I want you to come in and fix the stuff that's missing, get us a new product. I have things that I want you to do, right? And the idea is you're going to come in and you're going to solve my problems for me, right? That's what I want. So the mistake number one is to become a distraction. And some people you get, which is like, oh, hey, I just got hired, but is it okay if I take a 2-week vacation? Like, there's some obvious ways that you can sort of become a distraction, which most people know. And like sometimes this stuff happens, you deal with it, right? If you have family issues or things like that. But this is the idea. Don't be a distraction until you've established credibility, right? And we talk about this if you look at the relationship building courses and stuff, is there's a level of trust. There's a bank account that you have. And if your balance is zero and you start taking withdrawals, that is distraction, right? So wait until you've established some trust, some balance before you ask too big a question, right? Because if you're asking clarifying questions, that's good because that means we're going this way. And if you get clarity around that, we can go faster. You're being an accelerant. If you're like, well, Do you really want to be doing that? Because we can go this way. That is potentially a risky question because if the answer is no, we've already thought of that thing that you're thinking of, and now we have to retread it because you're here. We already had this debate. We already established that we're going this way, and you come in and you're like, well, shouldn't we go that way? That's a distraction, right? So this is problem number one, is being a distraction. Eventually you have enough credibility that you're not a distraction, you're a thought partner, right? But in the beginning, you have zero balance. When you start going this way, chances are it's going to be seen as a distraction. So first 90 days, just go forward. And then you can figure out whether you want to try to turn the ship. But don't try to turn the ship if you are there on day one. So don't be a distraction is mistake number one. Mistake number two is related, but it's the knowing too much or having the best practices that you know are the best practices because it tends to come with an attitude, right? That's really what bugs everybody, right? All types of personalities seem to kind of get bugged by this, which is you have the answer and you kind of think you have the answer, which kind of comes across as an attitude. So it's perfectly fine to have alternate ways that might be helpful, so oh, we're trying to solve this architecture problem. It's like, oh, you know, in my last role, we tried this, it worked well. Do you think it might work here? Is an open way to ask, knowing that it may not be the right, oh yeah, we tried that, no, it didn't work. Okay, cool, let's move on. What people tend to do is, oh, I know this one. Oh yeah, we fixed that in my last company. We had a much more effective way of doing this, right? That kind of idea of I know what's better for our new company because in my last company we did something different. Or in my experience, I quote, have the answer, right? Because unless it is the magic answer that suddenly solves everything, it can happen. But chances are people be like, uh, you just got here. How do you know that it's the right answer? You can't. You don't know our culture, you don't know our history, you don't know anything. Why do you think it's the right answer? Right. So that's the second mistake. So one, don't be a distraction. Two, don't know too much. Or if you do, offer it up as potentially helpful solutions, not I know this is the solution. You guys are idiots because you didn't think about it before I got here. Obviously, that's not what you say, but that is how it can come across. So those are the two biggest mistakes. If you just focus on solving the problem that you were brought in to solve, right? It all goes back to the basics. You are there to solve a problem. So solve that problem, and then you've built trust. Then you can figure out where to go next. But that's always job one. All right. So there's some thoughts around what not to do when starting a new role. All right. Next one, results. As an up and coming leader, where should I spend my time in relation to AI? Okay, interesting question. So AI is a broad set of things. It's everywhere, right? And it's everywhere. It's going to eat the world, like software did a while ago. So you should think about AI. And there are many places to go in AI. And so obviously it depends on your background, depends how technical you are. But my general advice for up and coming leaders is it's back to the executive job, right? Which we talk about obviously in the courses and the community. The executive job is direction, vision, right? Resource allocation and risk management. That's it, right? It is not a doer job, right? The doers, that's who you hire. You hire the people to do it. The executives do those three things. Where are we going? How are we going to allocate our resources? And what risks am I taking in those two decisions? And how do I mitigate them? That's it. That's the job. So AI, same sort of thing. You ask those three questions. What's the strategy? What's the vision? Where are we going? How does AI fit into where we're going? You need to think about how are companies using AI? Where does it make sense to use AI? Where does it not make sense? Should I build my own model? Should I use sort of the big hyperscaler models? Should I have a custom model that I built? Like, where is it going? What should I do as a business owner, function owner, whatever you want to do, right? In that job, you need to think about how is AI going to affect all the different streams of business. So that's one part. Two is resource allocation, right? Where am I going to use it? Again, am I going to build my own? Am I going to use the other ones? Which job is it going to replace? Is it going to replace jobs or augment jobs? How am I going to add a new toolkit? So when you have your resources today, you have people, you have capital budget, you have operating budget, you can sort of rent software. There are many different ways to allocate your resources. And now you have a new category, is basically the way I would think about it, which is AI. So how do you think about reallocating your team, your function, your resources to AI? And then the last part is, again, risks. When I do all this, when I pick this direction, when I allocate it this way, what risks I'm introducing and how do I manage them, right? So if you know the executive job, if you know what you're trying to do, AI is just the next flavor of things. Obviously, it has domain-specific knowledge, but in general, as a leader, you need to think about those three things. So that's basically what I would say. AI, I would just create as its own category, right? It's a new category of software that's going to be very impactful. So rather than think of it as just another service I can sign up for, I would actually bump it into its own category. Say, how is AI going to affect my organization? How is AI going to affect my software stack? How is AI going to affect my product sort of design? Right? Just create AI as a new category for all the stuff you're going to do anyways as an executive, and that will be, in my mind, the best way to think about AI as an up and coming leader. All right. So there you go. Those are the questions I had for this week. As always, if you have any other questions, just drop me a DM or drop it in the community, and I will answer them next week. All right. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you in the community.